Greetings, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in. Tonight, we'll continue our reading of The Falsification of African Consciousness, Eurocentric History, Psychiatry, and the Politics of White Supremacy, Amos Wilson's speeches. We're in part two, the Eurocentric political dogmatism, its relationship to the mental health diagnosis of African people.
Greetings. My name is the Revolutionary Matron, and my show is called The Learning Curve. I broadcast on a network called KWAZ Radio. There are other hosts on the network I'd like you to meet.
Greetings, everyone. This is Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast, inviting you to tune in to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where Black problems are addressed with Black solutions.
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed here belong solely to the respondent, and they do not necessarily reflect any broadcast networks, affiliates, nor sponsors. The Learning Curve is a broadcast created for the benefit of my global community. Black is a consciousness. Content is being used for our commentary, research, criticism, education, scholarship, teaching, preaching, and news reporting. No copyright infringement is intended. I will make enunciation mistakes. I will give you my opinion about the information. And if you ever ask, I will send you my source.
Greetings, forecast. Thanks for tuning in. I'm so glad you're here. We're on page 83 of The Falsification of African Consciousness. This is subtitled Compensation. So there are these contradictions in the system. Education systems that make us dumb, that teach us how not to think. Welfare systems that keep us poor. Foreign aid that keep our African nations in states of poverty. Religious establishments which are going to send all of us to hell. An egalitarian constitution that maintains inequality. It is this system that is projected into and interpreted in the minds of Black parents and Black people, that is also projected into the socioeconomic structure and thereby creates attitudes, negative self-perceptions, and frustrations. It is a kind of system that breeds mental problems, problems of criminality, and other kinds of problems that are duly diagnosed by psychologists and sociologists and social workers, that are duly treated by those who are in the helping professionals, who ultimately end up helping themselves to us rather than helping us. As a matter of fact, we could see those professions as part of the system itself. Our responses to these contradictions include problems with identity. Some of us respond through overcompensation, those of us who are going to prove to the white folk that we are the greatest in the world. We see some people succeed as a result of failing. The success is often based on failure. Success can be a type of failure, you see. That is one reason why often success does not bring the kind of personal satisfaction and peace that many people seek, and why often the individual, despite all the material evidence of having succeeded, still feels psychologically cheated because one can achieve for the wrong reason. So when we achieve to prove to somebody else, to show the white folk that we can do it as good as they do it, it is a success that is still guaranteed to make us sick. It is motivated by the wrong reason. We must get caught up in succeeding as a total way of life. We then must get caught up in fearing failure and therefore become obsessive and compulsive. We must have a feeling of pressure, a feeling of imminent disaster is pursuing us at all times. Therefore, success becomes a burden, and often we have to drink, smoke, and do all other unhealthy kinds of things in order to contend with it. We have the successful people coking just as much as the unsuccessful because often they have succeeded and failed for the very same reasons. And their very successes and failures helps to maintain the status quo. Are we studying Egyptology to prove to the white man how great we were? And hope one day that when he acknowledges that Egyptians were Africans, that he will accept us as human beings? Is it our study of Egyptology a personal and collective defense mechanism, a means of dealing with our hurt pride, as a means of trying to slip into the acceptance of white people by the back door? Is our hang up with history and the exaggeration of certain of our achievements means by which we try to salvage a damaged ego? There is the ache of inferiority that never goes away. And we study, and we study, and we read, and we read, and we learn the hieroglyphics, and we still feel inferior because we are pushed by the wrong reasons. And when we are motivated by the wrong reasons, even though we may replace the people who rule over us, we will end up being just like them. Our succeeding for the wrong reasons sets our minds up for being inculcated and possessed by the very devil we fight against. And therefore, another revolution will have to be fought, and it will have to be fought against us. Consequently, it is not enough to succeed in the society or to fail. Some people succeed at failing. The white man tells us we're no good, and we work very hard, showing him he's right. Yes, we find the parallel situation in many parent-child situations. You will never be nothing, and the child shows them with a vengeance how it will be nothing. I am going to make sure you see, Mama, every day that I'm nothing. I'm going to flaunt my nothingness in your face. I'm going to make you cry every night, and I'm going to make you go to the jail and try to get me out because you told me I was just like my daddy. No good, going nowhere. Or else you will do it the other way. I'm going to show you how good I am. And he succeeds, but he succeeds with the emptiness in his heart and in his mind. Our victory leaves the taste of ashes in our mouths. We wonder where the happiness went, and we say, is this all there is to it? Nothing hurts like failing unless it is success. Many of us found out when we broke into the white mainstream America that there is just as much hell in there as it was to where we were to begin with. We have to recognize then that it is not a matter of making it in the system, but a matter of questioning the system itself. It is not just a matter of equality within the system, but the very critical looking at the system in and of itself. So many of us, in responding to the contradictions projected by the system, react with rage, apathy, stereotypy, paranoia, suspiciousness, depression, and mania, and even bourgeois nationalism. Oh, yes, we have some bourgeois nationalists here. It is not only the ruling class whites that seek to perceive the condition of our people as a result of the moral failings of our people or of some moral deficiency. We have to be very careful and make sure that we also, as a people, do not see ourselves this way. Yes, we, as Black nationalists, well fed with jobs, have to be very careful when we think the only thing our less fortunate brothers need is a lesson in Egyptian history and a lesson in Black history and a lesson in morality. And voila, when all the Black people find out that they were great Egyptians and great Ghanaians, oh, what a great dream will have come true. Then we will find out that we will be pretty much in the same condition we were in before. What we are fighting against, as Paul said in the Bible, are principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places, from Ephesians 6 and 12, against a real power, not just a mindset, but against the real flesh and blood people who are in control of the world's economic system and social system and military system. Mere knowledge, morality, values, though of great importance, are not going to be enough to extricate us from the situation that we are in. So as you can see, he identified our problems one by one by one, and the escapisms that we try to fall into, like drugs, alcohol, sex, smoking, other forms of, even some forms of the historical memory that we go into trying to escape our Blackness, is not going to work. We got to face this situation head on. The politics of diagnosis. We are talking about diagnosis and the relationship of mental health diagnosis to political and racial dogmatism. When social workers and psychologists do not begin with the political system, they become obsessed with the diagnostic procedures. Psychology concerns itself with the predicting behavior, with being able to determine to a very fine extent the characteristics and the symptomologies of various mental illnesses. Mental health disciplines concern themselves with the categorization of behavior and the means by which this process is carried out. Getting obsessively involved with the diagnostic procedures, psychologists and others in this area can deceive themselves into thinking that they are doing great scientific work and that they are politically neutral in their approach to life. Mental problems not only denote a disturbed psyche that an individual is disturbed, but that the individual disturbs our psyche. When we say an individual is disturbed, we not only indicate that the individual may have problems, but we indicate that we are having problems with that individual. Did you hear that? When we identify someone as a problem, as mentally disturbed, we are indicating that we have problems with that individual. That individual is not only disturbed, but the individual disturbs us. So then, diagnosis involves a dualistic relationship, not only in terms of what behavior is exhibited by the patient, but how the behavior reflects upon others and the persons who is making the diagnosis itself. and it exhibits and exposes the relationship between the person being diagnosed and the one doing the diagnosis. Therefore, diagnosis is inherently social in nature, whether it is being done by the psychiatrist, the psychologist, the sociologist, the social worker, or anyone else. Being a social relationship, psychological diagnosis is a political affair. It is a part of the political system. So when we see an individual with a disturbed psyche, the individual disturbs our psyche and our mental equilibrium. In the process of diagnosis, it is not only the imbalance of the individual that we are looking at, but at the threat to our own mental imbalance. Then the individual then is not only disturbing to his own peace of mind, he is disturbing to our peace. And in more ways than one, he is disturbing our ways of doing things. Therefore, the behavior that we are diagnosing may represent a disturbing question in our ways of doing things, our values, and the nature of our social relations. The behavior of the so-called sick individual threatens us, threatens to expose our failures, our hypocrisies, our collusion in being about the state of mind of the individual who confronts us. So diagnosis is not a one-way street where only the patient is looked at. Diagnosis is a two-way street where both the patient and the psychiatrist look at each other and work out their problems together, not just the patient's problems. When we talk about the so-called diagnosing of our people, it involves an analysis not only of the behavior of our people, but of the behavior of the society as a whole. And we must recognize this fact and face up to it as a people. Diagnosis, then, is not merely procedural or neutral. As we have said, it is political to the core. It is a political act. Through diagnoses, the ruling society applies its ideological measures to the recalcitrant members of that society. It maintains through diagnosis the status quo, and most of all, through diagnosis, the society, where that society is unjust, justifies its repressions. Thus, when an individual is labeled in an unjust and unequal society and is labeled by the very people who maintain its injustice and inequality, then the very diagnostic process itself and the very labels attached to the victims of that society are the very means by which repression is carried out in that system. Consequently, those of us who are in the so-called helping professions and in the business of diagnosing other people's behavior must recognize the degree to which we are a part of the repressive mechanism of the system. He's talking to Black psychologists, psychiatrists, sociologists, and social workers here. He's talking to Black people that think that they're helping. They need to recognize that they themselves are a part of the system. As the system looks at its victims in their faces, as it judges them, it sees its own behavior, its own face in the behavior and face of its victims and of its patients. The crazy behavior, the face of madness strikes terror at its very soul. That is, the society, through its diagnostic procedures, looks at the face of its victims, sees the face of its own deviance, the hidden, internal, covert rottenness it represents, is externalized, and glares back impertinently at it. As D'Amato, the New York senator, said yesterday, He's just intimidated by merely being in the subway in the company of Black people, that merely seeing Black teenagers and people on the street is intimidating. And he's not the only one. Many of us, as Black parents and individuals, are intimidated as well. We are more frightened of our own children and by our own people than we are by another people. And that is a sad commentary upon our state. When we see them, they look back at us, but in a sense, they show us ourselves, and we get angry and hostile, and we contend, how dare the victim bleed under the cutting lashes of our social repression? How dare you yell out in pain when we kick your butt? How dare you strike back when we strike you? How dare you protest when we kill your youngsters in the street? How dare you disrupt our court proceedings when we are doing the legal lynching in our courts? How dare you accuse us? The system asks. And it says, there is no time to deal with the social and political casualty. The menace that you people represent must be removed immediately. I find it somewhat amusing that after raping and robbing the world, after killing and destroying, after building weapons that will kill each individual in the world 10 times over, after permitting individuals such as Howard Hughes and others to be worth billions of dollars while others starve to death, after robbing people day in and day out, the European thinks he has a right to sleep at night, that he has the right to walk down the street and feel safe, and has a right to be treated civilly. What kind of fools does he think the people of the world are? What kind of world does he think this is, that he can get away with rape and robbery, then expect the victims not to protest in some fashion, form, or the other? To be that protest self-destructive or otherwise. But we have a system that asks the so-called helping professions to keep them away from us, make them invisible, convert their behavior, make them adjust to the system in one way or the other. Use your diagnostic and treatment powers as a means of giving us peace at night. Thus, diagnosis in this context becomes part of the problem. It becomes the means by which the establishment denies its own culpability. It becomes a defense mechanism by which the establishment denies its guilt and defends its self-image and prerogatives. Diagnosis becomes the means by which the establishment projects its criminality and its own insanity onto its victims. Diagnosis is, in this instance, a mechanism of denial, projection, and repression, both psychical and political. Through diagnosis, the establishment finds that it is what it is looking for. In its criminals, it finds evidence of a criminal nature: broken homes, uncaring, rejected, or permissive parents, alcoholic, criminal, or absent fathers, disorganized or ghetto neighborhoods, moral laxities, skewed values. That is to say, it is infinite in its infinite wisdom and scientific reflection. The system finds a criminal type and says, the criminal type that we find on the subways generally is one form that comes from a broken home, between the ages of 13 and 25, male, comes from a disorganized community, smokes and drinks intoxicating liquors. This criminal type is aggressive, has a weak ego, is hostile, prone to injure his victims for no reason. He is poorly educated, can hardly read, has identity problems. He resists authority, has no respect for the property of others. He is totally hedonistic. Hence, the psychological profile is born. Yes, this may be the kind of criminals that you find in the subways. These may be the kinds of people you find mugging. But does that say that there is a criminal nature existent? Or does that say that a criminal nature has been created by a system? So then, when the psychologists and the psychiatrists do, ignoring the political social circumstances, is to test the individual and measure the individual and find exactly what the society has created in the name of so called diagnoses. And the game is on. Diagnosis then becomes individual, just as the ideology which rationalizes the repression of our people is individualistic in nature. Through diagnosis, a preventative program is promulgated. And how do we promulgate the preventative program? We have a program now that says that we want to identify career criminals. We are going to arrest career criminals who have just robbed and stolen quite often. And when we get them again, we are going to lock them up because it's 25% of the criminals that produce 75% of the crime. Isn't that nice? Doesn't it sound scientific and neat? Since we are able to diagnose and looking at our computers determine who is a career criminal, all we have to do now is go out and arrest them, put them in jails, and then we can sleep at night. Oh, our great criminologists, aren't they wonderful? That may be true. Who's fighting that kind of diagnosis except those that the root of the problem is not dealt with? So, the system creates the career criminal, then finds a means of identifying the career criminal, and then punishes the career criminal and thereby commits a crime in the name of the law. And we wonder why the prisons create criminals, because they are a part of the criminal assault against the people to begin with. Greetings, Sister Ra, and the elders listening with you. Thanks so much for tuning in. Through diagnosis, then, what do we get as preventative programming? More policemen, more retaining of people in the ghettos, stricter and swifter sentences. We say bring them in today and string them up tomorrow. Build more prisons, inject more potent psychotropic drugs, carry weapons to defend yourself, more birth control, more positive images, hold up the black tokens so that they can learn to mute their behavior while they are striving to make it. More token job training, more government project housing, more welfare, more summer camps, more fresh air funds, more PALs or police athletic leagues. More of every kind of band-aid solution rather than the fundamental restructuring of the society in and of itself. So the identity program, in other words, the program for identifying the so-called career criminal that is supposedly based upon diagnostic technique, is a program that involves everything but a societal self-examination. Everything but fundamental social reconstruction, everything but a radical reorganization of social relations. We have more social workers, more psychologists, various and sundry helping professions, yet we dare not say that the society is sick. How can we say that a society is sick? Only people can be sick, right? Well, people are society, of course. But I ask you, if the society is not sick, why is it that we have so many psychologists, social workers, and all of the other helping professionals? They must be attending someone, and we can't get enough of them. We hear again and again more, 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 more social workers, more psychologists, more psychiatrists, more special educators, more, more, more. This indicates then that society is having some kind of problem. Constantly, it demands more people and more professionals who, in their very therapeutic relationships with their so called clients, symbolize and maintain the power relations of the society as a whole, who maintain the ethnic relations and the values that are responsible for a good deal of their patients' illnesses in the first place. Our very so called therapeutic relationships reflect the class organization of this repressive society. The middle class interpreting the behavior of the lower class, the middle class defining the behavior of the lower class or those that are outside of the society. The administration in this hospital, Harlem Hospital, and all other hospitals of similar nature reflects the general ethnic structure of our society itself. The administration of rehabilitative centers and other institutions that supposedly deal with our children, their very structures themselves represent the structure that drives their clients crazy to begin with. White administrators sitting on top with black lackeys working on the bottom, so the very essence of their work is undermined by the very structural relationship within the so called therapeutic environment itself. Hence, the one on one, the interpreting, defining Black counselors using Eurocentric psychodiagnostic ideology see themselves as part of the society to which they are rendering service. Therefore, the patient's face is a mirror, and in that face, we see our own madness. It mocks us. We feel a compulsion to break it into 1,000 pieces. We want to shoot it and destroy it because it tells us something we don't want to hear about ourselves. We don't want to lock them up and put them away because they indicate our own failings as a society. We want to chuck it and make it invisible. The face in the mirror our people reflect, we want to avoid. We diagnose the patient. We see the reflection as a property of the mirror, as part of its nature. It says nothing about us. We would like to think. In other words, then, when we look at the patient and we diagnose, we do not wish to admit a reflection of our own responsibility there. We want to say that what is reflected itself represents the nature of the patient. So, what he's talking about is the fact that there's really this compartmentalization that occurs where we're trying to isolate and push off and say that these people that are sick make us uncomfortable. And so we want someone to control them. We want them to be boxed in. We want them to be compartmentalized and shut off from society. But in fact, they are the result of this society in and of itself because the society itself is sick. The repression of Frankenstein. Diagnosis becomes a prerequisite for the legitimization of repression. Psychiatric repression, as well as legal and political repression, for the initiation of state terror. Greetings, APTV. How are you this evening? Thanks for tuning in. When we talked about the eight, we talked about the other things that are going on in our society. We see the diagnosis serving as a means for establishing state terror, as a means for the transformation of sadistic practices into the practices of rehabilitation, correction, psychiatry, and social work. The establishment thus legitimizes its monopoly of the right to incarcerate, to torture, to harass, to maim, and to kill in order to maintain its order through diagnosis, through the correct and bureaucratic execution of procedure. After careful, thoughtful, precise probing, measuring, and testing, Dr. Frankenstein, in the name of science and humanity and humanness, labels his own creation a monster, its behavior as monstrous. It possesses no social graces. No, it gets loud on the subway, calls itself by a degrading name for the world to hear, curses, smokes, plays loud music. We see it here. It is a brutal, it is dangerous, self centered, peevish, drinks, smokes a lot, and eats a lot of odd things, just as predicted by the criteria. Its behavior, the condition of its life correlate highly with our expectations. And therefore, we declare, Dr. Frankenstein declares, if it looks like a monster, if it walks like a monster, if it talks like a monster, then it must be a monster. It fits the monster profile. Our tests are valid. And this is ultimately what diagnosis does. It finds its own creation through the use of Eurocentric diagnostic instruments. And this not only occurs where there are mental problems, but where there are physical problems. A lot of the physical ills that plague our people are created as a result of dealing with the legal and political repression that is existent in the world order today. Thus, we find Dr. Frankenstein creating the monster, diagnosing the monster, then rehabilitating the monster, and ultimately destroying the monster that he built. But who diagnoses Dr. Frankenstein? Is not the madness of the creature a reflection of the madness of the creator? Who will rehabilitate Dr. Frankenstein? Who will stop his fiendish experiments? This is the issue that we have to deal with today as a people. I would like to say one thing. There are many of us who say, those people who mug us, terrorize us on our streets are Black like us, so this is not an ethnic thing, right? They mug more Black people than they mug white people, and they intimidate Blacks as well as whites. We cannot deny that is true. It doesn't help us. It doesn't help for us as a people to deny that as the truth. It doesn't help us as a people to deny the reality of the situation that we are in and to deny that a sizable percentage of our people are behaving in ways that intimidate not only the so-called white man, but intimidate us as a people. And that reality has to be faced as well, and many of us are reluctant to discuss it. I don't want to leave you with the impression that we are a passive people who are totally manipulated by Eurocentric structures and who are created totally by the white devil. We also, as a people, must examine ourselves and see to what extent we have participated in the creation of the monster. We must look at the nature and type of leadership we have provided that has helped to maintain the situation as well. We must look at the responsibility that we have ignored and that we have denied exists as a people. We must look at the opportunities for controlling ourselves and for developing a different kind of people. Therefore, it is not only the white man who cannot sleep at night, we also are not able to sleep at night because part of the situation that we face is also our responsibility as well. We must look at the assimilationist leadership that we have permitted to represent us in this world today. We must look at the kind of leadership that always has had its face turned outward toward the white man and neglected the education and resocialization of our own people. A leadership who has spent his energies trying to convert the white man instead of, in part, using that energy for converting ourselves as a people. We are not only the creation of an evil European, we, in part, have helped to create the European. The power of self-transformation. As noted by Chancellor Williams, who wrote The Destruction of Black Civilization, the way we think, the way we behave, helps to create the kinds of victimization from which we suffer. The oppressive configuration the white man has assumed in relationship to the black man is in good part the result of the fact that we have permitted ourselves to remain in complementary subordinate configuration conducive to his oppressive designs. The white man cannot be what he is unless we are what we are as a people. And one way of transforming the white man is through self-transformation. He cannot be what he is if we are not what we are. Therefore, we must take responsibility for that part of our personality, that part of our community, and that part of ourselves over which we have control, and change that part. And if we change those parts of ourselves and our community, we shall change this man who gives a damn about changing him anyway. It does not matter. One of our major problems is that Black leadership has been involved in converting whites. That misleads us time and time again. Give it up. One of the major steps in the rehabilitation of the Black man is to give up the white man and forget about him. I see children and I see people who are crazy, blaming their mothers. She didn't love me. She rejected me. She never hugged me. She never kissed me. I was the darker one and she liked the lighter one. And we get story after story and justification after justification. And the person remains in his or her craziness, waiting for the other person, mama, to change. And the surprising thing about this is that if mama changed, you'd still be as crazy as you were before, because the energy dissipated waiting and trying to change mama has been diverted, and the energy needed for self-change has atrophied. And therefore, even when the opportunity presents itself, the personality is unable to take advantage of it. The Black community must examine itself and see to what degree it has contributed to its own madness, demise, oppression, and powerlessness. A part of the problem of mental illness is not what people do to each other, and not what mama or daddy or somebody else does to a child. A part of it also is how what mama does is reacted to on the part of a child. It is not so much what the European says we are inferior and that we are this and that the European maligns our character, etc. It is the belief on our part that what he says is true that drives us crazy. It is a crazy reaction to what he says, an insane and unthinking kind of approach to dealing with that he said, to dealing with what he says about us that maintains the craziness. So, how we deal with what the European does is what makes us crazy. It is the reaction of anger, as Cobbs and Prince points out, the reaction of rage. Yes, we are going to find rage in teenagers and rage in people that destroy and prey on the community. And it is this reaction that distorts reality, distorts the individual's creativity, distorts the necessary unity, and distorts the very mechanism that can get the individual out of his or her behavior. I was talking to one drug addict who was outlining the regular thing about their mama not loving her, and mama mistreating her. And so she saw herself as having only two choices. Either she would become that mama she said she would become what mama said she would become, or she would become better than what mama said she would become, both being reactions to mama, still both tied her to her mama, both making her a creation of her mama. The black bourgeoisie is as much a creation as as is the black criminal. They are both reactionary styles and both a means by which a people try to deal with the dilemma of white oppression. And quite often, people think, as she thought, that there are only two choices. Either I react to it that way or I react to it the other way. I react in terms of rage or I overachieve. But if reactions of rage and hatred and vengeance are not permitted to capture the personality, to consume and concentrate consciousness and attention, perhaps then to another alternative, another approach will be discovered. This is the thing that we must recognize in ourselves as a people. Reactions in terms of depression, rage, and anger, reactions in terms of compensatory mechanisms are reactions that help to deny the criminality on a certain segment of our people and that obscures the behavior of many of our teenagers in our current situation, which help to maintain the situation in and of itself. The problems confronting Black people did not just occur under Ronald Reagan. The disemployment of Black people is not something that just occurred under Ronald Reagan. They have been doing that all along. Since we touched foot in the New World and the Europeans set foot in the lands of African peoples, why can't leadership deal with that issue? Why is it we say that Black people are losing out in the so-called arms race, as they call it? Arms race? Why aren't we questioning our leadership when, since the 1950s, after our great victory in the Supreme Court, the situation of our people is worsening? We have a leadership that refuses to confront forthrightly the issues and the circumstances in which we find ourselves. For that we must hold ourselves responsible. For the madness and disorganization that flow from that, we must hold ourselves responsible. For not capturing economic and social control of our communities, and for not building up Pan-Africanism, and for not building up our brains and studying and reading and writing and organizing and developing, we must hold ourselves responsible in part for the madness. I therefore suggest that the issue then is not so much one of diagnosis of the patient, but a diagnosis of ourselves, a diagnosis of the system, and more so than that, getting on with the work of revolution. And that is the end of section 2. We'll be going on to part 3 next week. But as you can see, he felt that we had it within ourselves, and we do have it within ourselves to make these changes. We don't have to react and respond to the system if we're doing the things that we want to do. We don't have to wait to be reactionary. And as he said, the bourgeois are just as much a reaction to white supremacy as is the criminal. And I wonder what you all think about that. I think that the bourgeois are trying to assimilate into the white upper classes, into the white middle class, but they haven't yet recognized and learned that they can never integrate and assimilate into whiteness. But they're trying to prove something to the white man. They're trying to prove to him that they are good enough, and that the criminal has just who has been benignly neglected by leadership, which is still true to this very day. This book was compiled, in the year 2000, and give me one moment. The first time it was compiled was in the year 1993. I'm reading the second printing, which happened in 2020. But he was thinking these thoughts in 1993. These things are still true to this very day. We have a leadership that benignly neglects us. And now we're all in a situation that we're in because we have a leadership that has benignly neglected us, and the unheard have rioted the only ways that they know how. They're not rioting in the streets, but they're rioting by giving someone else a complete maniac political control. And we'll see what happens, because perhaps they will change. Perhaps they will begin to listen to the cries of their people. Perhaps they will begin to understand that they can't continue to benignly neglect a mass of people who support them electorally through the political process. All right, guys. I want to thank the Forecast, Sister Ron, the Elders, APTV, Anthony McPhail, MG2, Koku, uh, Afro Native, Bawana Haguziki, Oni from the Pro Black Perspective, Brother Bakari, and so many others that are listening. I value each and every one of you. The forecast says they don't learn or change. It's their nature. They don't learn or change. It's their nature. You're absolutely right. They don't learn or change. And they continue to do these different things to themselves. The white man could not be who he is if we were not who we are. So we have to be the ones to be upright men and women and be the ones to change our situation. Because if we're not the ones that are going to stand uprightly and make a change and be self-defining and be self-determining, then they're going to continue to run over us, because that's who we've been in the past. So now that we have begun to understand the past of who we have been, then now we can build a future of and build up the character and the personality of who we want to become. I want to thank you for tuning in. I appreciate each and every one of you. I will be back Monday at 7 p.m. We're reading Slave Breeding on Mondays, and I'll be back Tuesday to read part 3 of the Falsification of African Consciousness, which is basically how the European has supplanted our consciousness and created the monster that is the African in the Americas, that is the criminal, that is the vagabond, that is the prostitute, that is all of these different undesirable characteristics. That is a creation of the white man. Even with music and entertainment, why are they dressing that way? Because they've been told to dress that way. Why are they behaving that way? Because they've been told that that sells records and they're going after that money. They are worshiping Mammon, going after the money god in an attempt to escape blackness. So they will do and present and project any image this white man tells them to present and project. So they have gotten to the point where they are willing to do anything to escape the poverty or the situation that they were in their younger years, thinking that this is a solution, but it's not. It's not a solution, because when you escape your past through undignified means, your past will forever haunt you. When you escape what you were by undignified means, your past will forever haunt you, because you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you can't face yourself. And they wrought calamity on our communities because they are being this example of obtuse sexuality, of over sexualized males and females, of pimps and hoes. They are putting these images out there for our children to consume. That's why you have to be careful about what our children consume. You have to be mindful of what media they're taking in, okay? Because they are consuming it, and that's the image of femininity that they will have, or of masculinity that they will have. And those are inappropriate images. But those images continue to be projected out there because the white man wants you to think that that's all you can ever be. So they pay them a lot of money to project that image onto you in an attempt to get that reflected grotesqueness back at them, so that they can continue to pathologize you and put you in subjugation. So this is the game. This is a part of the game that they're playing. All right, guys. I thank you for tuning in. I value each and every one of you. I want you to always remember, every single thing that touches your life, whether it is religious, social, or political, must be an instrument of your liberation, or you must throw it into the ash can of history. All right, guys, I will see you Monday. Peace.